So good afternoon. For those of you who don't know Ron Sexsmith, Ron's a celebrated singer-songwriter who currently lives in Stratford, Ontario, moved there a little earlier this year. Ron has recorded 15 albums over the course of his career, including this year's The Last Rider. Has won numerous Juno Awards, including 2002 Songwriter of the Year, and was the subject of a documentary in 2010 entitled Love Shines. So would you please welcome Ron Sexsmith.
Good afternoon.
So, although I introduced Ron as a singer-songwriter, we're here to talk about his work as a novelist. He has his new book, Dear Life, out, and I guess I'll start with just the obvious question: why did you write this book, and why now?
Well, the last thing I ever wanted to do really was write a book. I never wanted to write a book. It just seemed too hard, I didn't think it would be even possible for me to do that. But what happened was I had one of those sort of, when you wake up but you're not ready to get out of bed, and so you end up falling back to sleep, and then you wake up and it's 3 hours later, sort of thing. I'm a musician, so that's my life. So when I'd woken up for the second time, I felt like I'd just seen the trailer or something for a movie. I'd seen, it's like, I saw a boy in the woods and a witch, and it kind of confused me because, normally I would have, get these ideas for songs, in that same kind of period. And, but I could tell right away that it wasn't a song, it was something else, and the only way I could make sense of it was that I thought, well, maybe it's an idea for a musical, which is, because I'm insane, I'm working on now based on this book. But this was back in 2012, so I spent a few years just walking around, thinking about it. And also, I have some friends who are who act, and so I would talk their ear off about this idea, but there wasn't anything they could do. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to produce that movie for you. So it just sort of went around and around in my brain for a number of years until a fellow at Penguin in Toronto heard a rumor I had a book. And I know this doesn't happen like this, but he had contacted me out of the blue, and I said, well, I don't have anything written down, but I'll come in and tell you about it. I didn't even have a title or anything, so I went down to Penguin, and I sat in this room with a long boardroom table, with him sitting at the other end, and I was on one end, and I was like, oh, this is a story about a boy who goes on this ill-fated hunting trip, and he accidentally shoots a dog that belongs to a witch, so after I thought they were just going to throw me out of there, But he said, well, that's a novel. That's actually a novel. You should write that. And he may have just been humoring me, so I would go away. I don't know. But this was about February of 2015, and he said, well, see if you can have your first draft in by August. And I was heading out, I think the following week on tour, and so I just sort of made up my mind. That's how I was going to spend my time in the van, because we have these really long drives. And so I started almost immediately, and it was actually really nice to have a deadline, because I'm pretty good at sticking to things. It's my one quality that I have, I don't really give up. There were people telling me to give up music when I was in my 20s, because I was, pushing 30 and I hadn't had any luck yet, but I just sort of felt, well, surely I have to make it in music. It's just, I was born on the same day as Elvis Presley, so that sort of kept me. Then that's the stuff you hang on to when you believe something is meant to be, So But anyway, so I stuck with it, and I handed my first draft in by the end of August. But obviously they didn't go for it, you know. So I shopped it around. To a few different publishing houses and got, I got some rejection. Mostly it was people that thought it should be this, it should be a graphic novel, it should be this and that. But I really, after putting all the work into it, I didn't want to, compromise on that, because I'd got quite attached to all the characters and stuff.
So how fully formed was it when it was a dream, and how much of it sort of developed over those years?
It was just bare bones. I mean, all I had was. This is really all I had, was a boy killing this dog that belonged to a witch, mistaking it for a deer, and the witch changing him into a deer, and that's all I had. And I thought at first, well, maybe that's a fairy tale I've already read, I thought, so I was asking my wife about it. Have you ever heard of this before? And all I knew is that it was an idea for a fairy tale, and I didn't know how it would end. I didn't foresee really anything until I started writing it. And the first time I realized that, okay, this is really happening, is when I came up with the characters of Deryn Hedlight, which sort of made everything, brought everything into focus. And also around that time I thought of the title. Oh, this is the other sort of funny thing. Well, the book is called Dear Life, and when I went to Penguin, I'm sitting in the lobby, and I look up, and on the shelf there's a book called Dear Life by Alice Munro, and I thought, thankfully spelled differently than mine. I could be wrong, but I think that may have where I got, because I don't even think I had the idea yet when I went the first time, but I'm a little vague on the details now.
So you did say that you wrote it on the road. I mean, most writers work in private, have a set kind of schedule. I mean, how do you manage to write a novel in the back of a touring bus?
Well, we were actually it was not even a bus, it was like a van, like a sort of a splitter van type of thing. I just had my laptop on my lap, where it's supposed to go, and I just typed away, and I was a little worried maybe I would get car sick from that, but it was actually a great way to pass the time, because normally I would be reading a book or I would be listening to music or something, and I didn't write it all in the van, but I definitely got a big chunk of it done. But I did like 16 drafts of it too, so after I was writing at home for quite a long time, and I was writing in dressing rooms, on airplanes and things. So, because that's the thing about writing a book. I mean, songwriting is hard in its own way too. But with this book, I really didn't have anyone to bounce it off of. All I had to go on was just, what would Charles Dickens do or something. I'm a big fan of his work. So I would try to think. Is it okay if I put this in brackets? Am I allowed to say this? Or am I allowed to do this? And I have a few writer friends I would ask their advice, and mostly their advice would be, well, try to write 1,000 words a day, basically, which I think I was sort of doing anyway, so, yeah.
So in the preface of your book, you talk about, and I'm quoting you here, being surprised to see how many unforeseen characters and subplots would emerge, and that was very different from songwriting. Can you talk about the differences between songwriting and fiction writing?
Well, with songwriting, you have the luxury of melody and repetition. So you can repeat the first verse if you want. Which you can't do in a book. You can't repeat the first chapter, like down the road. And the other thing about songwriting is you can, if you have a really good first verse, you can base your second verse on that. You could use a similar rhyming scheme, even words that kind of sound the same, and turn them around a bit, like Lightfoot does that all the time. And it's just easier, and also obviously you're talking about a 2-minute, 50 seconds thing. It's pretty, at least the songs I write are very concise. So with this book, it was just, I didn't know when it was going to end. I was working on it, and all of a sudden it would occur to me that, that something needs to happen here, or this character just, is nagging at me to write a whole chapter about him, and it was like, so it was just interesting how immersed I was in it, because I really, my wife, I sort of went missing for a long. I was just in my office typing away, but I was not even in my house. I was in the town of Hinthoven, and I could see the town and I could see the people, and it's like if their arm went up, my arm would go up, and I really didn't know where it was all going. And I remember writing the last chapter before I wrote the epilogue, but writing the last chapter, I felt like the book was writing me. I was just typing away, and I was just as curious to see how it was going to end as anyone that might be curious, but so it was just very different, and I kept going back to it because a lot of tweaking involved. I don't know if it's like that with real authors and that, but there seemed to be a lot of tweaking going on, because stuff would occur to you like, oh my God, the continuity is wrong. I have to go back to chapter 3 and fix something because it's not going to line up with something else. So that doesn't happen with songwriting either so much. So.
Yeah. And was it a fairy tale from the very beginning? I mean, obviously you've got a witch, which.
Well, it didn't seem like it could really be any other kind of story, And it's not that I love fairy tales, but I would have been just as happy if it was a crime thriller or something, I would have, like I say, I wasn't looking to write a book. It was just this landed on my doorstep, and even when I met with the Penguin people, I assumed they would probably team me with somebody that, to help me write a book. And but he said, well, you're a writer, you can figure it out, what to do, and I'm sort of glad he did that actually, because the book is out, and to me the most amazing thing is that I have a book, and I'm really proud of it, but even if it was the worst book of all time, I'm like, wow, I wrote a book, because a lot of people say they're going to write a book, but they never do. Because it's hard, right? It's so.
Yeah, and the whole I was actually quite surprised, because I'm not in the habit of reading fairy tales on a regular basis, but it was remarkable how quickly that kind of universe took over.
Oh, thank you.
And it's an interesting experience. I don't know if it's the case with most fairy tales, but it's an interesting experience because it's taking you out of your everyday. And like you say, if it was a crime thriller, it'd be set in an environment that you would know. But with a fairy tale, you're going once upon a time to a place that in a sense doesn't exist.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and it was quite remarkable how kind of full that was, and how easy it was to lose myself in the book.
Well, thank you. Well, the thing is too, the book, even though it is a fairy tale, all the characters it's kind of rooted in a world that I understand, or we understand. Every character in the book has sort of experienced some form of loss. There's a widower and a widow, and even the witch, you sort of feel a bit sympathetic for it. And there's no handsome prince or anything. They're all sort of these average or, sort of awkward people that are sort of forced to become heroic, which is kind of how it works in life. People, heroism always seems to come where you least expect it, and so that was the other thing about it, that even though it is a fairy tale and it's set in a sort of time where there's no cars and all that stuff, like a lot of those fairy tales are. So, with me writing this book, there's a hunter in there. I don't know the first thing about hunting. I don't know anything about witches or anything. So, but it all seemed kind of beside the point, because for me, the story was more about the love between the mother and the son, and that was really that was kind of the deal for me. Yeah.
For anybody who follows you on Twitter or reads the book, it's obvious that you love wordplay and you love puns. Is one of the attractions of writing a book that it gives you more room to experiment and play around with words?
Yeah, definitely. There's a freedom of if you want to elaborate here or embellish something, you could take a. I'm like I said earlier, I'm a big fan of Dickens, and I always liked the way he described situations and the people. And some people felt he was very long-winded, but I always kind of liked reading about, just somehow the characters' names would describe their personality, and it was sort of fun to do that in my own little way, I didn't want it to be a pun fest or anything, I wanted it, there are some in there, but it wasn't really about that. But yeah, the Twitter, it seems, because it seems like kind of a useless thing, really. So for me to be on Twitter, I couldn't think of anything else to do but write these stupid jokes that normally I would be bothering my band with, and
So they're happy you're on Twitter.
Yeah, because I'm a big fan of Jack Benny and Groucho Marx and those people. That's always been the kind of humor I've enjoyed, and like dad jokes, I guess you could say. And but Twitter, it's grown. When I got on Twitter, which I don't even have a phone, right? So I do it on my computer, and I didn't want anything to do with it. But when I first started, there were 600 people on there from my management running it. But since I've been on it, I think I joined 2012. Now there's like almost 31,000 people, and that's just from doing stupid jokes. And also there's music stuff. I have a YouTube channel where I've done about 400 cover songs. I do them in my kitchen or something, and that's helped it grow. And so I see the usefulness of it, and but at the same time, I'd like to get off it eventually, because I don't want to be, sometimes I wake up and I don't have a stupid joke to write. I'm like, so I have to spend some time thinking of something, which I don't really want that in my head. I don't want to be thinking about that all the time. So, yeah.
Given that this is a fairy tale or almost like a bedtime story, do you think the book is best read aloud?
I hope it reads well. I mean, my wife just read it to, she was house sitting and babysitting this kid for someone that she knows, and she read him the book out loud, I think over 3 nights or something, and that's what she told me it was. But that's what she's my wife, right? So she told me it was it read well, and when I was writing the book, oftentimes I would finish a chapter and she would read it back to me, and then it was kind of like with songwriting, you can hear, I need to fix that, or that sounds a bit clunky or something, so you go back in. So it's very helpful to hear it out loud, I think. Maybe, so I really don't know.
Yeah. Is there an audio book version of the book, or plans for it?
I saw something about that in the contract when I was signing with Dundurn, but no one's asked me. I don't think I would want to hear. I might do a reading today, but I don't have the right voice for it. Like Morgan Freeman would be great. I don't really have. Because I wrote the book. There's a narrator in the book, who I always like those Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons, and they always have the narrator, like he was kind of obnoxious, and I wanted the narrator in my book to be kind of annoying that way, like where he's not content just to tell the story, he has to get his 2 cents in about everything. So that's what I tried to do, and it would be cool to have a guy read it, or for an audiobook that had that kind of stuffy, self-important sort of voice, But so no one's asked me yet to do an audiobook, but we'll see.
Fairy tales usually have a happy ending, and this book does. Although you sort of tack on a kind of an interesting epilogue to the book as well, and just curious if you did that for dramatic effect, or if you did it to kind of keep the door open for future stories?
Well, even the prologue and the epilogue were written after my fifth draft or something. So initially it started with the chapter about the town, and then it ended, with the happy ever after bit. But yeah, then it occurred to me around, like say draft 5, that it might be nice to have some, have the book open up with a kind of foreshadowing of something bad, kind of something wicked this way, kind of sort of thing. And when I got to the end, I felt that I didn't know I was going to leave it open-ended, but I definitely wanted to sort of have an abridged thing where I say, this is what's happening with the characters, and they changed the name of the Fist and Firkin to the Fish and Firkin, whatever, they do all this sort of stuff. But then, as I got to the end, it occurred to me that, well, Crad Grimsby's one of the characters, but his missing sister might come back, and that could lead to a part 2. So at the moment, I'm writing a sort of calling it a prequel sequel, where the first half of the book would be the backstory on the connection between the witch and the Grimsbys, and which I sort of allude to here and there. And then the second half of the book would pick up right where this one left off. But that's whether or not if I can do it, because I'm not totally convinced I'll be able to finish this other book, but we'll see.
So you're also in the process of writing a musical based on the book. What's the process for doing that for you? And is that any different than writing songs for a record?
It's actually easier than writing songs for record, because all the songs, like throughout this book, even as I was writing it, I could see all the characters breaking out in song. That's because I'm a songwriter, so I would see. I would see it happen, and I think even if you read the book, you maybe you'd be able to see that yourself, that in one of the chapters, when Deryn, and his love interest Clara, they kind of have this moment where he's looking at her, and in his mind he's hearing some voice inside say, "She's absolutely lovely," as the wagon pulls away, and so in my musical, that's when he breaks into the song, because she's absolutely lovely. So there's sort of things that seem like obvious places for songs to go. But it was actually very easy, because when you're writing an album, you don't really know what the album is until it's finished. You have all this stuff swirling around. Usually I have about 10 or 12 songs I'm working on at the same time. And lyrics are always the hardest part, because you're trying to sort things out, or you maybe have a melody with no lyrics, and you're trying to figure out what it could be about. But with this, there was instructions of what each scene, what kind of song needed to happen.
And set up in such a way that there's a song for each of the chapters?
Almost, yeah. And there's a few instrumentals. The town's called Hinthoven, so it begins with something called Hint Overture, which I kind of was very happy with that. And there's a sort of a chase scene in the movie when Deryn meets his other deer in the woods. And so I've written a song, an instrumental that, it's almost like a William Tell overture type of thing, that you'd see them running through the woods, and if it was ever a movie or something. But so yeah, I've written all these songs, and there's a couple that repeat. Like there's a song that later on in the book, there's this thing called Augusta Fest, which is sort of like a fest, where there's kind of this. I call him, he's not in the book, but in the musical, the guy called the Random Stranger, who would be singing some of these songs, almost like the narrator, and he would sing this song about Augusta Fest. And so there's songs where you kind of would expect songs, might go.
Yeah. So you've offered to read from the book and then also play a song based on that chapter. So if we could get you to do that now.
The only thing I'm wondering how I should, because I have to hold the book and the microphone. Is that do people do that?
Is the podium set up?
Is the podium set up?
Yeah.
Okay, let me go over there then. Hello, can you hear me? All right. This is me at the podium. And by the way, the sound man's name was? Chuck. So when I play the guitar, I'm going to have to unplug my guitar again to put the strap on, so just to give you a heads up there. So anyway, what I thought I would do, there's a chapter in here that's all about Hinthoven. Should I read the part of the chapter or the whole chapter? Or? Is it okay if I read the whole thing? And then, so what I thought, just to give you an idea, I would read the Hinthoven chapter, and then I would play the Hinthoven song, and then my work is done. Okay, this chapter is called A History of Hinthoven, Hinterlands, and Hedlights. That's the name of it. Okay. And there's a little horrible map that I've drawn that looks the worst map of all you've ever seen. Okay. The town of Hinthoven was nothing much to write home about. In fact, no one could even vaguely recall a letter, postcard, or package ever being sent to or from there at any point in time. For this reason, and possibly a few others, it has been largely omitted from the pages of history. That is until now. And it is no secret that for many people living in nearby townships, Hinthoven had long been considered the punchline of numerous and humorless jokes. All manner of good-natured ribbing, as well as many not-so-good-natured things, had been said over the years in taverns and round dinner tables, such as Hinthoven, the city that can't take a hint, or Squinthoven, which apparently just sounded funny, and all said by folks who'd never even set foot there. For the good citizens of Hinthoven, however, it was simply put, a nice place to call home. People were kind, the air was clean, the water was pure, and life in general was livable. To look at it on a map, it would appear the whole town was caught in a perpetual headlock between a peaceful river to the east and a menacing forest to the west. Just outside the city center and to the north a bit lay prime farmland, acres of orchards, vineyards, and plush rolling meadows that seemed bent on rolling off the face of the earth. And wherever they were heading, the sky looked eager to follow. The town itself got its name from one Marcus Hinterland, who for many years had owned the land it was built on and much of the surrounding area as well. The old Hinterland farmhouse, too, standing today where it stood then, though occupied for some time now by his great-grandson Magnus, Magnus's daughter Clara, and their faithful housekeeper Tressa Mundy. But we'll get to them soon enough. If you were to stroll around the city center on a day like today, you'd find a town fairly bursting with activity, anxious-looking people rushing to and fro, horses and carts going every which way, street musicians ruining all your favorite songs, and children doing what children do best, alarming and annoying the grown-ups. To say it was easy getting lost in Hinthoven would be a huge understatement. Even those who'd spent their entire lives there could find themselves frequently disoriented as if in a maze. For every street seemed to spiral into each other, jut out unexpectedly, or end abruptly, so one was never sure if they were even on the same street they had started out on. You might think the city's forefathers had been inspired by the great mysteries of the universe when designing their street plans. And clearly it had not occurred to any of them that more than one horse and cart might wish to pass down the same street at the same time, for each was ludicrously narrow and filled with pedestrians at all hours. In fact, it was on one such crowded, narrow street where lived Deryn Hedlight and his mother Maggie, in an abode so humble that it looked positively mortified to even be mentioned in this book. Today, being the anniversary of Pearson Hedlight's death, loving husband to Maggie, stern but patient father to Deryn, we find both in a reflective mood after their somber gravesite visit. "What do you suppose Dad's doing right now?" asked Deryn innocently enough. "Well, if I know your father," said Maggie, "and I do, I'd say he's enjoying his pipe right about now, assuming they let you smoke up there." After which she took a moment to ponder this ancient mystery before vigorously stirring a pot on an old wood stove. "You know, I never told you," said Deryn, after a moment's reflection, "but Dad caught me smoking his pipe one time, and—" "Oh, I know," interrupted Maggie. "Your father and I never had any secrets between us. He told me all about it. Why, I can remember him saying, like it was yesterday, a man must earn the right to smoke his pipe, at the end of a day's work, or after a hunt when you've brought food home for the table. And he was right," she exclaimed, while pointing her wooden spoon seemingly toward heaven. Deryn looked wistfully at the spoon, then at the rifle hanging over the fireplace. He was proud of his boy, though, Maggie went on, sensing a shade of doubt in her son's melancholy face. And don't think for a moment he wasn't. Oh, I know, Ma, I just wish I... Deryn's voice trailed off, for his attention was drawn to an imposing shadow now moving across the curtain. The shadow belonged to one Jacques Tortiere, noted hunter and local bully, who at that very moment was pulling a cart of fresh kill from his latest hunt. Tortiere supplied meat for the local butchers and made a pretty penny, too, when he wasn't boozing or beating people up. To say he was well-liked in Hinthoven would be a stretch, but if it mattered to him in the slightest, he'd never let it show. Better to be feared than loved, he'd often say, to no one in particular. Deryn himself could recall quite a few unpleasant run-ins between his father and Tortiere over the years, so the mere mention of his name could conjure up a whole multitude of emotions, none of which were helpful in any way. Ma, Deryn asked, after returning to the present. Yes, dear, she replied, with eyes peeking over the pot. Well, I was thinking that perhaps I'd go hunting tomorrow. This he said with a hopeful yet altogether heartbreaking air, and though looking in the direction of his mother, his eyes were fixed upon a world somewhere beyond her and out past this once cheerful home. Maybe it's time, he continued, that I started acting like... Here he paused to rise heroically from his low seat in the corner. The man of the house, the man Dad always wanted me to be, he said, and finished off with an expression verging on bravery, though verging from a good distance, truth be told. But still pondering the great mystery of pipe smoking in heaven, Maggie responded as anyone snapping out of a daydream would. Sorry, dear, were you saying something? That's the top there. So, could I have blood now? Yeah. And, right. So, as I was saying, this song deals with, this is one of those proverbial musical numbers where the people are singing about how great their town is, and like Oklahoma or something. So you have to imagine that in a musical there'd be people running around the village singing this song, and I hope I don't mess it up. You can hear that all right? There's something about Hinthoven, here our love is woven into all our hopes and dreams. And when push comes to shove, then you will find enough of what you really need. The birds all sing hello, the lovely steeple chimes, for the people who know not the hour. Wherever you are roving, old Hinthoven's overflowing with a heavenly shower. If there's one thing about Hinthoven, here our doors are open to the woes of those in need. With hearts as warm as ovens and nobody judging you or your beliefs. The friendly baker smiles, the grouchy butcher scowls, the florist arranges the flowers. Wherever you are going, you are golden, old Hinthoven, it's a neighborly town. Peaceful river to the east, foreboding forest to the west. Acres of green, fetching orchards and fields, stretching out before us, what a harvest it yields. What a harvest it yields. One more thing about Hinthoven, though you may be laughing at our homey, wholesome ways, but from cradle to coffin we have seen our share of loss, of grief and pain. Yet still we carry on with gladness in our hearts and faith our only power. Wherever you are roving, olden Tobin's overflowing with a heavenly shower. If in Tobin's where you're going, we're beholding, you'll be golden. It's a neighborly town. So you could see that, right? Everyone jumping around, okay. So, and just, I mentioned the song earlier, She's Absolutely Lovely, so I thought I'd play that one, and that would end my musical portion of the show. And this song actually appears twice in the musical. At the beginning, sung by Deryn Hedlight, and then later on in the book, it's sung by the Crad Grimsby character, who has developed a huge crush on Deryn's mother. And so he's on his way through the forest, but I'm going to do the Deryn Hedlight version right now. This has got a lot of high notes in it, so wish me luck. She's absolutely lovely. She's obviously good. And if I could only prove my love, I would. She's living in the country. I'm lost here in the town, but I'm sure if I could live inside of her heart, I'd know my way around. Some things in life are meant to be, or seem almost heaven sent. So I believe her smile was meant for me. She just obviously doesn't know it yet. She's absolutely lovely, would only do me good. And so if I have to wait my whole life for her hand, I absolutely would. I would. Thanks, everybody. How are you?
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Actually, we've got just a couple minutes left, and we can certainly open it up to the audience if anyone has a question for Ron. Yes.
I've heard it said since you first started that you were compared to Paul McCartney. I can't tell the difference in that last song.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, he's a way better singer than me, you know. I mean, I got to sing with him once, actually, in his house, of all places, and back in '96, when my first record came out, because it had been out a year here, but it just kind of died a slow death. And then in '96, it got released overseas, and that's where I found my audience. And so I was over there touring England, and I got an invitation to go for breakfast at his house, which was just like so surreal. But no, I mean, obviously growing up, I loved, you start off trying to sound like everyone, your heroes, right? My biggest hero was Ray Davies from the Kinks, though, that I still see him as being the biggest influence of my music and everything.
other questions? Actually, I've got one for you.
Okay.
Regarding the musical.
Yeah.
If you were going to play a character in the musical,
Yeah.
which one would it be?
Well, I would probably, I don't think I could, because I can't really act, I don't know how to act, but I would have to be, maybe, like I say, there's this character called the Random Stranger who sings some of the, like he sings a few of the songs throughout but he's not in the book, you know. So, but, because the Deryn character would be, 16, 15, and the Craig Grimsby character, I guess would be more around my age. I'm 53 now. But I don't really look like him in the way I see him in the book. So I sort of see a John C. Reilly type person playing him, actually. Yeah. Oh, there's a question.
Having been a songwriter for so long, do you find yourself grappling at all with imposter syndrome being an author?
Oh, totally, yeah. Because I know as a songwriter, especially when I was struggling to get a record deal, it used to really bother me if Bruce Willis made a record or something like that, you know, or if somebody, and he had as much right as anyone to make a record, you know, and I don't even consider myself, even though I've written a book, I consider myself a songwriter who's written a story, like Harry Nilsson wrote The Point or something, you know. So, and no one else was going to write the story for me, right? So that was the main thing. But yeah, I mean, I have as much right as anyone to write a book, but I don't. Yeah, I've always been a stay in your lane type of person, in general. So I get that, especially for Penguin to reach out to me. I know there's a lot of brilliant, struggling writers out there that Penguin doesn't reach out to them, but it was only because of my music career that. Maybe they saw dollar signs. I don't know what it was, but this story, I did everything you have to do to write a book. I did 16 drafts. I went through the substantive edit. I did the copy edit. Even after the copy edit, I realized they'd changed about. There's a bunch of things, like 30 things that I didn't agree with. So I had to go back and I got most of them restored. Which I was happy about. So that I went through the whole process of doing it. So.
Thought about who you like in your musical and where you might like it first performed.
Well, I live in Stratford, so yeah. So I've actually been meeting I met with the music supervisor and I met with a playwright because for this book to work in that environment, I would need a proper adaptation. Because there's animals in it, and the dialogue is rather minimal, so the dialogue would have to be fleshed out, and it would have to have a really crafty art director, because to make things come to life, like I say, the deer and the dog and all that stuff, which they can do some amazing things now in the theater. So, right now I'm currently waiting for the head of the Stratford Festival, who has my book on his table, to see if it's something they might want to commission. Because I could never do this. At the very least, if it's never a musical, I would like to make a recording of music from Dear Life that would come out at some point. But I don't think it's completely out of the question. It might make it to the stage one day. So, yes.
I hope that you would actually put the last song you sang was so beautiful. I hope you would put it on the record.
Well, it's definitely going to come out, but I would like it to come out in this sort of world, like on a music from Dear Life CD, or whether it's a cast album of the musical someday. I mean, these are really lofty sort of dreams that I have, But yeah, the song definitely will see the light of day at some point. Yeah.
I hope to make a video of that song. It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks. But also I hear a kid singing it, like 16, with a really beautiful high voice. I always love those, all over the musical with a really angelic-looking boy singing. I'm so high, I swear I could fly, that stuff, right? I always love that, and so it would have to have the right casting. With musicals, you don't always have to have great singers. I wouldn't want really actorly type singers with overdoing it or something. I would like to kind of more natural voices, I think, you know. Yeah.
Have you considered making a child's version of it with pictures, like a picture?
That was my first idea. After I got, you know, through the thinking it was a movie, it was actually, I was at this is how the Penguin guy heard about it, because I was at the Ottawa Writers Fest one year playing music, doing a concert, and I was talking to one of the organizers, and by this point I thought it could be a nice little children's book with pictures. And so I asked her if she knew anyone in children's publishing. And then it was like, I think maybe 5 months after that when the Penguin guy emailed me. And it was really his idea that it could be a novella or something. And so it's still, even though now it's a book, it still could be condensed to a children's storybook. I don't know who would do that. I would love for that to happen though. That'd be great. Oh, there's one there.
Like Harry Nielsen's The Point, would you ever consider animated versions?
I would love for it to be a movie, whether it was an animated movie or like now, you know, they have these real life Beauty and the Beast and like, or Into the Woods or something. I would love it, any kind of, that would be the ultimate dream if whether Pixar or Disney ever, and anyone like that ever got a hold of it and liked it enough to do something. So yeah, I would love that.
All right. Well, I know actually Ron and Colleen have to get on the road. They're driving to Montreal today. Actually, Ron's performing Monday night
At the Leonard Cohen tribute, yeah, in Montreal. Yeah.
So, on behalf of everyone here, Ron, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Awesome.